Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and here are my impressions on Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Quick version, it's okay. If you heard my thoughts on Force Awakens a few years back, you can largely apply the same sentiment here. They played it a bit safe, and so much of Rise of Skywalker felt like fan service or just a repeat of things we've already seen years ago. But it was put together well on a technical level. But now we'll go into more detail, and there'll be spoilers throughout this video, so if you haven't seen the film and are concerned, that's your warning. Run now. And yes, I'm tired. Didn't get much sleep last night. Well, let's start with the positives, shall we? As mentioned, the film is put together well in the sense that most of the shots are competent and the audio is mixed well. There were a few nice shots in the film, and the special effects were good. Rey's Mary Sue aspects were toned down a lot in this film in a lot of ways, and they weren't as egregiously distracting as they were in the last two movies. In this movie, some time has passed, Rey's actually had some training. People have had time to establish a relationship with her. So it's fine that she's able to fight and do all these things. A lot of people think, when they hear people complain about Rey, oh, you just don't like female characters. Which is not true at all. To give you a very quick comparison, think about Jill Valentine, a character I like a lot. In Resident Evil 5, she's an experienced veteran in this zombie world. She's been in this line of work for, 20 years at that point? So it makes sense that she can handle things. If she were like that in the first Resident Evil, it would have been ridiculous. Even though she was already a trained cop, she didn't have experience dealing with monsters. So her reactions and her vulnerabilities made sense. A character needs to earn their strength if they are your main character who's supposed to be having a growth arc, a hero's journey. We need to see it. If you just tell us a character is strong, it doesn't have the same impact. And I know someone out there is thinking, but what about the Mandalorian? He starts off as like the best bounty hunter in the quadrant. Yeah, but he still has weaknesses, and his character growth is not about his strength, his skill with a gun. His character arc is more based on his development as a person, you could almost say a father, becoming more human, but I'm not going to go big into that because, spoilers, and this isn't a Mandalorian video. But it's not the last time we'll be mentioning Mandalorian. Either way, that was one area Rise of Skywalker improved upon. It would have been a lot more satisfying had Rey actually earned it and actually come up from nothing as Luke did. But then again, that also would have made it even more of a copy of the original films. Instead of a farm boy from a desert planet, you have a scavenger from a desert planet. Main difference being Luke was useless, Rey was already the best at everything the moment we see her. Rey was handled better, that's mostly it for the positives. There's a strange issue that it's not really a positive, it's more of a Rise of Skywalker trying to fix crap from Last Jedi angle. Remember how people complained that Snoke was a nobody villain who served no purpose? Well, his backstory is explained within moments of this film starting. Hand-waved away with, I made Snoke. They also hand-wave the Lightspeed ram away with, yeah, that doesn't work, really, that was just luck. And the rules of lightspeed or hyperspace are once again made even more bizarre. If the concept is that you need to chart a path through a hyperspace lane to avoid ramming into planets, stars, or whatever at the speed of light, then why was Poe able to just zip in and out of it at the start of the movie? Was he just entering light speed and hoping he didn't hit something? I don't know. Don't think about it. That kind of seems to be every defense for these new Star Wars films is, don't think about it, you're overthinking it. It's just meant to be an experience. So many things in Rise of Skywalker are done just because, and coincidence, and it bugs me. I know some people will argue that Attack of the Clones did similar things. Oh, how convenient that he just happened to know about this planet that was missing, or this dart comes from here or there, and just happens to do this, it just happens to lead here and then there. And you know, it does surprise me that I'm defending Attack of the Clones, of all things, but most of the happenstance in that film is not happenstance. It's an intentional breadcrumb that only looks like coincidence until you remember that Palpatine planned it all. He wanted the clone army discovered, seemingly by a coincidence. He wanted it utilized because obviously the clone army was going to be his. But he didn't want it to look like it. He wanted it to look like, oh, the Jedi just happened to find this giant army. Whereas in this film we have a dagger that happens to align with the wreckage of the Death Star. They happen to be at the exact angle for it and at the right time. Because there's constant violent storms and sea activity, which, you know, erodes stuff. It was a really bizarre moment that could have been handled better. And that's, you know, also ignoring the fact that the Death Star got atomized in the last film it was in. Now it's just mostly in fragments. Sure, you can hand wave that away, whatever, but just happening to have a dagger that happens to align with the exact point, that was just really weird. I mean, was it Sith magic that makes it always happen to align to what it needs to align to? But in that case, wouldn't it mean just anyone could use it? Why are they even using a physical object? Weren't Jedi really more about the intangible? Same with the Sith? Whatever. Outside of the, oh, we have to find this object that will help us find this object that will help us find this planet, not being a very interesting story, Poe and Finn have minimal development in this film. And it honestly sounds like one writer overheard another writer through like a wall whilst they were wearing earphones or something, and it said, what if they have character moment with a lady? And then the writer who heard it wasn't sure if they meant Poe or Finn, so they wrote very similar scenes for both of them. Frankly, Poe and Finn have been completely wasted in this trilogy. Poe's arc is what? He went from good pilot who's bad at leading people to good pilot who's good at leading people, but then there was no payoff for that. Then what about Finn? He had the most potential out of all the characters, should have been the lead character in this trilogy. It's fine to have Jedi and chosen ones and all that, but there's no reason they can't be secondary and Finn a primary one. But they completely wasted it. Anything interesting they could have done and should have done with an ex-stormtrooper was just squandered. And that's such a shame, because in this film everything is just about Rey and Kylo, the latter of which has been consistently the most entertaining part of the series, with Adam Driver being the best actor here and giving the best performance too. I've said it before, and I'll say it again now. This new trilogy serves no purpose. Yes, the characters in the prequels are bad, but the prequels themselves are important. We learn lots of things about the settings. Some things we didn't need to learn, sure. Other things we kind of did. And if nothing else, it was interesting. At least to me, we saw new planets. We saw events that we kind of wanted to see. But the sequels are just repeats of what we've seen, what's happened before, with slightly different takes on it. We aren't learning anything new about the universe. They're doing their best to invalidate the old story. Rise of Skywalker, ironically considering the name, invalidates and kills off the Skywalkers. Anakin's entire arc, the crux of the entire saga, largely invalidated, boils down to him now saying, "Hey Rey, you go," at the end of the film. Without even making an appearance, he just says that. Luke and Anakin, they didn't defeat Palpatine. Now I know some people are going to say, well, Anakin's arc wasn't dependent on him killing Palpatine. It was dependent on him saving Luke. Sure, I get that. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about killing. It was about saving. And he saved Luke. He went back to being Anakin. He redeemed himself. But he redeemed himself by saving Luke. He redeemed himself by ending the threat to the universe, the galaxy that he brought about. Having Palpatine survive, A, means Luke wasn't safe, B, the galaxy wasn't safe, C, it really didn't mean anything. Because, I mean, the Death Star was going to get blown up anyway, so all that happened was he became good again, which isn't very satisfying in the grand scheme of things. The film doesn't explain how Palpatine survived falling down an exploding space station. Did he jump to another body? Did he die and become a Force ghost and enter a new body, like some weird Voldemort? Was it a clone? Who knows? Who cares? Luke and Anakin, the entire trilogy doesn't matter now, because Rey beat him using the one thing he never foresaw. 2 lightsabers! And that's another thing! If Palpatine survived Episode 6, there's no reason he wouldn't survive Episode 9. Some will go, this time he was destroyed by his own power. Whereas I say, what sort of idiot gets killed by their own power? In Episode 3, it made a lot more sense for various reasons. First off, Mace Windu's entire approach to combat was being a conduit for the dark side, allowing it to flow through him without touching him. That's why he was able to reflect the lightning back on Palpatine. You might remember that Obi-Wan never did that. He only caught the lightning that Dooku used on him. Same with Yoda, he caught the lightning and absorbed it. But you know, we can always assume that Rey is able to use Vapad as well, allowing the dark side to flow through her without touching her. I'm fine with that. But Palpatine was letting Windu kill him in the sense that he was trying to come off as weak for Anakin's sake. If Anakin hadn't been there, Palpatine wouldn't have just kept zapping himself until he blew up. He needed Anakin to save him. He was like, Anakin, remember, I'm the only person who can save the one you love. Either way, if a dude can survive being blown up in the middle of space in a planet-sized explosion, being zapped by his own lightning doesn't strike me as any more lethal. It's not very satisfying. Oh, and is it me or did Rey copy Tony Stank's last line? Thanos was like, I am inevitable. Tony was like, and I am Iron Man. Palpatine's, I am all the Sith. She's like, yeah, well, I am Iron Lady, all the Jedi, I mean. Are Disney copying themselves? Palpatine wanted Rey to kill him so that he could go inside her, you know, as you do. But did it have to specifically be bopping him with a lightsaber? Did destroying him with lightning not achieve the same thing? Because it's not like he specifically said, you have to kill me with a lightsaber as revenge for your parents. Maybe that could be inferred, but it doesn't make any sense. With Luke, he wanted Luke, I mean, I don't know if he wanted to actually die against Luke, but he wanted Luke to strike at him in anger and fall to the dark side. With Rey, I don't see why it would make any difference how he died. As long as he died, then he could go inside her. Why does she need to be in the dark? It doesn't make any sense, because he's like, kill me, she's like, no, then she goes to kill him anyway, but she's trying to kill him in a good way? Is that what they're saying? Is that what Disney is saying? You can kill people in a good way? Because that seems very strange to me. Another issue I have, call it a nitpick if you will, the whole force healing thing. I have no issue with force heal being a thing, because, you know, it was kind of a big deal in episode 3. Did you ever hear the story of Darth Healy Man? I just don't like how randomly it came up this time. The entire reason Anakin fell to the dark side is he was obsessed with finding this power and using it to save Padme. Turns out, all he needed to do was be nice to a snake in a cave? Did Rey instinctively know this power? Did she read about it in the ancient Jedi texts that Anakin didn't know about? Does she know it because she's a Palpatine, and she had the knowledge, but also the affinity with the light? Sort of like when you pick up an item that's for a mage and you're a fighter, and you can't use it even though you have it. Did Palpatine know about it, but he was unable to use it because he was evil and darkside? I mean, probably not, because Rey is able to use the lightning even though she is mostly on the light side, and they've strongly implied in lots of Star Wars that all of the powers, they aren't dark side powers and light side powers, they are just how you use them. Like a Jedi could use Force lightning, but they don't, because they're not meant to use it as a weapon. And I know Kyle Katarn is no longer canon, but his whole thing was that there aren't evil powers and good powers, there are just powers, and it's how you use them. They don't explain anything about the Force healing, but I can only assume it's something instinctive to certain Jedi. Very few Jedi, maybe. That's why, Obi-Wan never used it on Qui-Gon. Yoda never used it on Padme. But then Baby Yoda in The Mandalorian, he instinctively knows how to do it, even though he hasn't been trained. He instinctively knows how to use Force abilities. Rey instinctively has this Force healing ability. That's okay. They could have explained it a tiny bit. The film had a lot less random side plots than Last Jedi, which was nice, but it still had a lot of stuff in it that sort of whooshed past with no consequence or meaning behind it. I rewatched Last Jedi in anticipation of watching this one just so I could, refresh myself. And I had to skip I had to skip everything in the film that wasn't Luke and Rey, because everything in the film that isn't Luke or Rey is actually pointless and doesn't serve any purpose, even more so after watching Rise of Skywalker. You can condense down The Last Jedi, whatever it was called. You can condense that one down into like 5 minutes of content that matters. Everything else is filler, doesn't matter, completely pointless. The world isn't interesting, the characters aren't interesting or funny or interesting. I know I said that twice, but hey. Plot leads nowhere. If there's any sort of ham-fisted message in there, it's embarrassing enough that a 14-year-old would be self-aware enough not to go through with it. And anything that does come across as interesting, such as maybe Luke having some doubts about the ancient Jedi ways, it's a mistake. It wasn't actually intended, because by the end of the film, he's like, nah, Jedi are cool. Because you might remember, they had this whole thing in Episode 3. At the end of Episode 3, Yoda realized that the Jedi as they were, not bad, but ineffective, and they had become corrupted in a sense, and that Qui-Gon, who was starting to think of different ways for the Jedi to be, was actually more sort of progressive in that sense, which is why Yoda trained Luke differently. Yoda and Obi-Wan came to the realization that the Jedi Order was flawed. So having Luke also think that and then change his mind, it wasn't good. It could have been good, but it was written poorly, planned out poorly, and the whole point of it was just trying to do stuff that we didn't expect purely for the sake of it. Luke could have turned into a giant parrot, and we wouldn't have expected that. It wouldn't have made it any more logical though. It's insane how Last Jedi is such a long movie, nothing happens in it though. And it's not like the experience is the idea either, because there's nothing interesting to actually experience. It was offensive and pointless. Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker are safe and bland. At the end of Last Jedi, they ask for help, nobody shows up. This time, they show up, not because Luke gave the galaxy hope or whatever, they show up because Lando asked them to? I guess that makes sense, Lando's a cool dude. With a bit of tweaking, we could have had an interesting trilogy here. Finn should have been an ex-Stormtrooper who had a real arc. Rey could have remained a Palpatine, but they should have not decided that at the last moment and hinted at it throughout. The overarching threat should have been a new threat, not Imperial separatists and Palpatine, because that's boring and we've already had it. Works fine for a side story but nothing more. Luke should have been featured more prominently. The overall atmosphere should have been lighter, not, oh, everything we did up to this point sucked and failed and we're awful. Even if the threats are grim, we don't need Luke and Han Solo and Leia being miserable and old and failures. It's not a good way to send out the heroes, saying that yeah, everything you did before doesn't matter. We could have had a nice trilogy where perhaps the message was letting go of old hates and passing on what you've learned. Instead we got the originals again, but without any of the soul or the message. You just need to compare the moment of Anakin's rebirth when he saves Luke with Rey's I'm gonna pull out my other lightsaber. It lacks any of the emotional impact, which is funny because you can't even see Vader's face, and yet that blank mask, looking back and forth, somehow more human than anything in this new trilogy. Rise of Skywalker at the end of the day, is, as I said about Force Awakens, a finely made product. But it's like a car made in a factory. It's cold, it's clinical, every facet is designed to make money or for mass appeal to one market or another. Rather than one man's vision, maybe flawed as it might be, it's a hodgepodge of ideas trying to recapture the magic, the lightning in a bottle. And I'm glad it's over. I'm hoping if they make more Star Wars products, they try stuff a little different. Again, not going to speak much about Mandalorian in this video, but I'm going to talk about it more in an upcoming video. Needless to say, Mandalorian is something new but familiar, and it's the most enjoyment and entertainment I've had from Star Wars in a very long time. It isn't perfect by any means, but it's good, and I'll explain why I like it in a future video. For now, I hope Disney just cool it a bit. We don't need Star Wars every year, okay? If you want to make another trilogy, just hire me. I'll make episodes 10, 11 and 12 for you. I promise I won't retcon this trilogy as being some sort of fever dream. Just make a Kyle Katarn trilogy. But hey, thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you thought about the film down in the comments. And until next time, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and all that stuff. Have a good end of the year, and I will see you in 2020. 2020.